Romesh Dodangoda, thanks very much for chatting to us today. And as a former University of Glamorgan student, I suppose, as University of South
Yeah,
Wales, is that right? Yeah, because
yeah, it was a while ago.
we're the same thing more or less. Which so it's great because I work at the university and I work with Lloyd and these kind of people who obviously you've met over
Yeah,
the years. Um, in fact, let me we want to talk a little bit about the CMF, which I'm sure you've been following, and there's a big night kind of, we're into the rock end of town tonight, and I know you do a lot of other things besides that, but you're particularly noted for that field. Tell us a little bit about your journey from the university into the wonderful world of music production.
Um, well, I mean, I started when I was quite young. I was as a guitar player. I was just constantly trying to get the sounds that I wanted to come out of the speakers,
Hmm.
and that's kind of where my kind of fascination for audio started. I guess it was.
What kind of guitar player are you, or were you, or same thing, I suppose?
Um, I mean, I love like bands like Oasis and stuff. So it was a lot of, nothing flashy or anything. But
Okay.
but for me, like I was always trying to get a certain guitar sound in my head to come out the speakers, and
Hmm.
that kind of took me down this trail of like trying things out and seeing how I could get closer to it. And then I had a little studio in the house for a while, and I was just working with a lot of local artists that I knew.
In the Pontypridd area at the time?
No, nearby though, nearby.
Okay.
Um, but then I started doing. There was a band called Kids in Glass Houses who were like, um, getting. Well, they just started actually, and I think after I did them, they started to get a bit bigger around the scene, and then there
Yeah.
was a band called Blackout, and the same thing happened with them. I was doing a band called Dopamine at the time, and they were all
Yeah.
starting. They were all part of this scene that was kind of getting really popular.
What kind of
Um,
year was that?
oh, I can't,
About?
2000,
Yeah. Okay. Because it
2005,
just seemed to,
something like that.
yeah, it just seemed to sort of bubble through at that time. Then the band started coming through
Yeah, definitely.
from that area,
And
roughly.
I think when those bands were starting to get popular, then I was getting a lot of phone calls asking because other bands wanted, my sound on it or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Um, and it started there really. And then while at some point when all that was happening, I went to the University of Glamorgan, did that. Um, but like I was always kind of still doing this all through it anyway. But and it just kind of started to grow and grow really. Like whenever the bigger those bands got, the kind of more I went with it in a way. Um,
So
so yeah,
was that good fortune to some extent, or
I mean, yeah, I mean, I
right
definitely
place, right
think so.
time, I
But
suppose?
yeah, I think there was definitely an element of that.
Hmm.
But I worked, also there's a lot of work went into, get, trying to get those records sounding as best as they could. So, it's definitely a lot of work involved. But yeah, I think it was just something that I kind of I give advice to a lot of producers who are trying to start out. It's like always make your last thing the best thing it can be because
Yeah.
that's how people judge you. So
Yes. So to interpret that journey, because it's a while back now, but you kind of as a musician, and wanted to get a good sound, started to record people, you managed to get this good sound together, people became aware of you, and it kind of just grew from there.
yeah, I think
Not a bad journey.
it's been cool. Yeah,
Pretty successful too. And of course, you're a well-known producer. I know you're Grammy nominated, and you've done some great things. Are you happy where you're at right now with where it's
yeah,
going? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, like everything's been great. I'm really you know privileged to work with some amazing artists. So
Yeah.
yeah, I certainly can't complain.
And where are you based these days?
So I'm based in Cardiff. I've got a studio which is not far from the centre at all. So
Hmm.
I've kind of got my private. It's a private studio. It's not a commercial one. So what
Okay.
it does is it allows me to kind of have everything set up how I want it,
Yeah.
and I can do records without having to hire another studio or anything like that. So I can kind of be quite clever with budget sometimes. If there's a band I want to do and there's not a lot of budget available, I can still make it happen. So
Okay.
so yeah.
And obviously you also work internationally as well, I guess.
Yeah, I've
Mm.
been around quite a few places now. The last one, I went to America for 2 months with Bring Me the Horizon, and
Yeah.
then we did the Ammo record out there.
Mm.
I've been out to New Zealand. Yeah, it's
Mm.
taken me all over the place, really.
Do you find when you're in America, for example, and you're working with guys over there, is there a different kind of mindset within the kind of community, the music community? Is there a different ball game, or is it very
I
similar?
think it does work in a slightly different way there.
Mm.
Yeah, I can't put my finger on how, but it definitely feels a bit different.
Yeah.
But it was great. Like the assistants were like really really good in the studio I was in, which is like super important for me. Like whatever studio
Mm.
I'm in, that the assistant is like the heart and soul of that session running smoothly. So it's they were really good. The studio was brilliant. Yeah, it was a great time.
I've got loads of questions here from students, but I just wanted to ask you a couple of things. You said about you're a fan of kind of the Oasis kind of side of
Mm,
side of town to a certain extent.
yeah.
What else are you into? What are your other kind of major tastes as you personally? I mean.
All sorts. I mean, I love pop music. I try and listen, to whatever I can, especially now because kind of music trends kind of develop and stuff. So, you want to kind of know like what's going on in terms of sounds and
Mm.
sonics, kind of, that are going with new releases today. But I listen to loads of stuff, to be honest.
So,
I'm always, I always find some kind of happiness listening to like music I grew up listening to. But I think everyone gets that.
yeah.
Um,
Just thinking about you as a kind of producer. I mean, I was in the radio industry for years, so like when I'm in my car, I'm listening and I'm the angry guy, listening to stuff. Oh no, you can't do that. It's
mm.
lagging off the radio and changing channels, etc. You kind of your kind of professional capacity sometimes eats into your consumption patterns. I mean, are you like that when you're listening to music, that you pick up on stuff that way?
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's it's a really hard thing to switch off as well. It's
Mm.
like sometimes someone play me a song and at the end they'll be like, "What do you think?" And like I've just been listening to like the snare drum or something. I
Yeah.
don't have no idea.
Thinking about the
But
mic techniques and stuff, I suppose.
yeah, but you have to. The hard thing with being a producer and and is something that anyone learning should take away as an important thing is you've got to be able to separate yourself from worrying about sonic stuff and actually listening to the song, because
Yeah.
your job is not, as a producer, is not just making it sound a certain way, but it's looking at the song and the arrangement and you know even looking after the band in the process, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of different sides to it. So it is really hard to separate, though. I find myself a lot of the time just listening to something and you are just zoned in on like some production thing that's going on, or
Yeah.
yeah.
I think at my level, I've played in bands for like 40 years and whatever. I always think even what it doesn't really matter what level you're at. Actually, if you go into a studio, you can have the best kit in the world, but if the guy doing the job doesn't have that kind of way of working with bands, then
Mm.
things may not go very well. It's quite important, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's massively important. I think a large portion of my job is psychology, like when I'm working with bands, and
Mm.
it's kind of, especially when I meet a band, if we're doing pre-production, like half that time is me just figuring out how the session's going to run, like who needs a helping hand somewhere or who's not very
Yeah.
confident, and you kind of
You
build all
suss them
those.
out, do you? Do you
What's
kind of
that?
suss them out?
I'm doing a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you just naturally do.
Mm.
I'm trying to work out, how this record plays out, and you might kind of discover, oh, the drummer's really quick, which means that we'll probably have more time to do this stuff, and
Mm.
the singer needs a little bit of help, so that's going to take. So all that information that you can get just by, just hanging out with the band or whatever, it's really useful information for me, because I can work out my my scheduling and stuff, because one of the things that I'm responsible for is making sure we finish on time, and the
Yes.
rest is delivered on time and all that stuff. So
Yeah. I mean, so many questions I could ask. Is that an Aerosmith shirt you're wearing, by the way?
it is, yeah.
Yeah, very nice. I just think, in a way, kind of, it's a strange analogy, but it's almost like a football manager. Kind of some players need a kind of pat on the back and a bit of a bit of
Yeah.
warmth, and some people need a bit of a kick. So that's
Yeah, and
it that way.
you've got to figure that out, and every band's different,
Yeah.
and there are sometimes difficult members in bands, and you've got to kind of deal with those in a delicate way. So yeah,
What about managers? What about the managers? When you're doing a session, do you have like a house rule on who should be in the room at given times?
Kind of, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't mind managers being there, but
Mm.
I also think that, I mean, the ones I'm very close to a lot of managers, so I'm not slagging anyone off here, but
Yeah.
but sometimes just anyone, like sometimes if the A&R turns up, it slows the session down because the band want to talk to the manager or the label. I can't play anything very loud, so I'm just trying to do things super quietly around their conversations. So yeah, I'm not strict about it, but I mean, if it's kind of managers and A&Rs, and if they do want to come, then they come. But
Send them down the pub.
I don't have any visitors coming in on sessions, so
No.
unless we're not doing something.
I think when it gets to the mixing stage, that's sometimes quite delicate. Who should be in on the mixing stage? Is that purely yourself?
Yeah, no one's coming in on the mix.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I
which
can't
is for the
do
best.
it.
No.
It's just the problem is if you're mixing with like 5 other people in the room, there are 5 people who want totally different things louder than each other, and you just can't do it.
Particularly guitarists.
And also, it stops me from. I get nervous with say I want to try something that's will sound a bit crazy at first, but it'll later develop into something usable. I get a bit worried then about trying this thing out in case they think I'm going nuts or something. And like I could be trying out a little, I don't know, some kind of distortion thing, and you'll get people behind you going, "Oh, what are you doing that for?" And
yeah.
So I always work with no one sits in on the mix. The only time I'll have anyone down is usually if I'm doing an album and there's like a bunch of revisions. Sometimes it's easy just to bring the band in.
Do you have a limit on revisions?
I don't know.
Some producers do, don't they?
They do, yeah. I mean, for me, I just want to get it right. I want the band to be happy with it. I don't want, I want them to be proud of it, and and then that makes if you put the work in there, they'll want to do some more work with you. But there are situations where if you've done a cut rate on something, then you may have to limit the revisions because otherwise it could be never ending. I think if it I mean I'm quite lucky that I don't really have problematic revisions from anyone, but if it's something that I'm going to struggle with, I just always invite them down. I'm always like, look, just come down and we'll nail it then, because they'll be in front of the speakers as well.
Well, you're a fascinating guy, and I'm really enjoying talking to you, right? Full stop, but I'm also aware that this Zoom recording is going to end at some point. I've got some great questions here from the students. Sure. Just to say, by the way, I'd really like to, I've contacted you before, I'd really like to use this on Keep Cardiff Live, which is all about music in Cardiff and South Wales, and obviously send you the link. If there's anything you're not happy with, just let me know. I just wanted to ask you one more question myself, and then we'll have to go through these questions. They're great questions, by the way. I think they are anyway. What was going to? When artists come in to you at the start of a session, do they say, "Look, we've got the sound of this band or this album in mind"? Is that something that still goes on?
Not a lot of the time. I mean, they may, I may ask, what kind of band you're into. I think it's cool to know that stuff, but I don't think anyone comes into work with me anyway like very insistent on it's got to sound like this.
Okay.
I'm quite into the idea of taking knowing what they like and what they're influenced by, but trying to make something that's our own than try and copy this guitar sound and all that stuff. So
okay.
I think doing stuff like that is like it's a journey for everyone. It's like trying different things out and seeing what suits the song, but we never sit in the studio and like try and A/B the song with someone else.
Yeah, like a drum sound from a certain album or something, no?
We'll get inspired by it for sure, but I don't think we'd go any further than that, really. Like, I think, unless it was something really specific we were trying to, mimic. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm an old geezer, so maybe in my days things were a bit different, in that way, maybe. I got this. Rosie Graham is looking after the night tonight. She's one of our students, and she's doing so it looks like a great night, actually. So if you get a chance to hook into it, I think you'd enjoy it.
Looks
Here's
really
some of
good.
the questions she's gathered from students. She's been sharing this. The first one is, do you have any pet peeves when it comes to bands and how they may act in the studio?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things, like, I think it's just when, like, there's loud conversations going on, you're trying to listen to something really closely, and you can't.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're such tiny things, really. I think the only things that annoy me, usually not in the studio, to be honest. It's like, it's mixed stuff. It's when I get tracks that are just, there's no labeling on it, and half the stuff's got errors and nothing lines up. That's the stuff that kind of annoys me a little bit. But it's what it is.
So that's kind of housekeeping stuff, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
When would you suggest local bands or up and coming bands invest into their band to record at a professional level in the studio? Is there a stage at which it becomes worthwhile?
I mean, to me, it should be from the minute you're serious about doing it, because the way I see it is the way, like, it's a first impression. For you want to blow a listener away from the beginning, surely. I think I've tried to explain this to people because I've got a kind of view on it, and it's, I think for in general, if someone listens to a song, they may not understand what production is, but they know if it sounds as good as this record they bought, in a shop or something, they will treat that band differently, and like they'll treat them differently to if they hear a demo of a band and it doesn't sound as good, they don't park you in the same. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah,
you
it
don't
does
get
make
looked
sense.
at as a kind of real, not a real band, but you're still on that demo circuit.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense because, like, when I've recorded stuff over the years, and then I always do the car test, burn it off on a CD and put it in my car, and I put it up against a kind of a commercial product, a professional product. Is just never in the same ballpark. You kind of hear it straight away, really.
At the very least, if kind of money's a bit tight and stuff, then at least try and get someone to mix it, because the mix is where you can really bring everything together. But it depends how serious you're taking the band. I think I think if you can do stuff quite cheaply, but at the end of the day, if you want to kind of make a dent at this industry, it has to compete with whatever else is out there. So.
Okay. I mean, at my age, I think I've had a go, so I think I'll park my money up. But for up and coming bands, it's more important. I want to ask you briefly about mastering. How important is mastering to getting it up to the high end sort of sound?
It is important. I think what we've seen recently, though, is a kind of shift in a lot of mixers are kind of trying to do that mastering side, which is fine if your monitors really well and you're very confident. But I think a lot of mixers starting out are kind of putting so much stuff on, so much limiting and all this stuff on the master bus. They're actually creating a lot of problems because they can't hear them.
Yes.
So that's when a mastering engineer is really worth a lot to the project, because they can listen to it, and they may even call you back and say, look, this is way too much low end in this kick drum, everything else is going to fall apart, can you fix it? And so I think when you're starting out, I think it's quite important to to use a mastering engineer when you can, because it's another pair of ears on your project as well.
I think the trick there is to leave plenty of headroom, I guess, in the mix before it goes to master, is it?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, headroom, yes, but I think for me, I mean, I do a lot of mastering myself, and then certain projects I'll get it done externally. But for me, I don't remove like the bus compression, or the EQ, because it's the sound of the mix for me. So the one thing I will take off is like the limiter, and I'll make sure there's there's enough headroom to play with for them. But like the compression stays on, because if I take that, I've mixed into that compressor, and if I take it off, the mix is just going to fall apart, and I can't rely on someone else to get the same thing I wanted. The mix bus compression is very much a part of the mix for me, so that stays all the time.
Okay, I'm only aware that I don't know how. I haven't got a flying clue actually how much time we got left, so we may have to go through some of these, because you give me some great answers. You
How
may
long
have,
is the recording?
Zoom is 40 max. We'll I don't know where we're at the moment, but
Well, I've got a pro account if you want me to call you back.
You could do if you get there. We'll see. Yeah, well, thank you. We'll see how we go with that. Yeah.
Sure.
This is on the same kind of thing, I suppose. One of the things about, I guess, recording well is getting a good sound to begin with. And there's a question here: what's the weirdest way you've recorded an amp? And it says, in the kind of rock or kind of metal kind of scene.
Okay, so there was a band called Decades, and I was doing that at Rockfield, a great band. And I wanted this very small but focused sound, so we got one of the little Marshall battery amps and put a big ribbon microphone on it.
Yeah.
And that was just such a cool tone. Like, things like that are really good when you want them to cut through everything else, because the speaker's so small, it's just so focused. So yeah, I mean, it's not a weird thing, but it's
unusual.
It's unusual. Yeah.
This one's a bit more technical, I suppose, but in today's modern growing technology, when it comes to amp modeling, is it important when in the recording environment to use equipment such as valve amps anymore? So I suppose it's in a nutshell, difference between sort of modeling amps and old school valve amps.
I think everything's like got really good lately. I mean, I've got a guitar plugin that's out now. It's with a company called STL. It's called Tone Hub, and you can, we made patches which are basically my amps mic'd up by me and all that stuff, and it just sounds so good. So like, it's scary how close things are getting. I still have my valve amps though, because there is something about it that still beats the modeling thing for me.
Which valve amps do you use, by the way?
I've got quite a big collection.
Okay, that's a long list. Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
But I think it's like the air movement between the cab and the mic still sounds superior to me. But like, it's so close now. Like the plugin, the STL Tone Hub one that I did, like I couldn't really get over how like close it was. It was it's wicked.
Literally plug in and go then.
Yeah, but I think if you're recording at home, that stuff is great. I'd say the only thing I'd recommend is always take a DI with every guitar part you record, because that gives, like, I get a lot of songs to mix and the guitars haven't been recorded very well, but luckily I've got the DI, so I can then either run it into my amps and mic it up or whatever. So I think it's always important to just keep those DI tracks recorded as well.
That's a good tip. Talking of tips, I know you cover a whole range of different things. You do a whole lot of things, but I mean, I'm asking about this stuff particularly because tonight is kind of a rock kind of event, really. It says top tips for a metal band or a heavier band on pre-production planning for a single or EP release. It's quite a big question, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, with metal bands and heavy bands, you're most likely playing to a click, so it's so important the drummer is like as practiced as they can be, because all that, saving that time, if the drummer's like really good, the drums for me are like the backbone of anything. Like, if you get the drum sounding great, everything else falls on top of it so easily, where if the drums sound bad, the rest of the production is you covering the sound of the drums because they don't sound good. So number one is like, make sure that the drummer is like totally on it. And I guess also it's same with the guitarist as well. Like, look at how how you're playing things and whether you can play them in a different voicing that's better on the tuning. Like the tuning is like such a problem with kind of heavy artists, because you know a lot of the time it's drop tuned and then the strings can't handle it. So you know things like
Yeah.
getting your guitar set up so that they can actually handle the correct heaviness of the string and all that stuff is.
Do you remember Dan Turner? Have you come across Dan Turner?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I
Oh,
remember, I
God.
remember Dan. You know, I've grown to like Dan over the years. Yeah, and he's a colleague. He's a bit of a character, and I think I'm right in saying this. That he had a certain thing, that was certain kind of guitar string manufacturers that he didn't want his guitarists to use in the studio. You know.
Yeah, I have the same. I won't say the name of them,
No,
but
it's fine. Yeah,
there's a certain string brand that
yeah.
I'm insistent that we don't use.
So if a guitarist turns up with that string brand on, you say no, you got to restring. And that's it.
Yeah, well, yeah, we won't. Yeah, yeah. I
Because
mean,
of tuning issues, I guess.
that and they just sound so dull. So, I mean, you know, I'm not that. If the guitar sounds good, I don't care. It's fine. But
Mm.
if we're restringing, because I've got like a big collection of guitars as well, and if we're restringing some of those, then I'll usually make, you know, I'll be insistent that we don't use, you know, a certain
Yeah.
string.
Are there string manufacturers that you prefer?
Yeah, I love Ernie Balls.
Mm.
Dario is really good. Those strings are great because they're nice and bright. They've got a lot of clarity to them. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those. I think they always, you know, they always sound really good to me.
Mm. It's funny because as a musician and a guitarist and whatever, I go in the music shop and I'm as guilty as anyone else. So that looks like a bargain, you know, but it's not always a bargain, is it?
Strings are so important,
Mm.
like because you know it's the difference between that extra 5% of the guitar sound. Sometimes it will be the string,
Mm.
and also just you know some guitarists have sweaty hands, so they die
Yes.
very quickly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but going back to the question on pre-production, is just
Mm.
prepare as much as you can. If there's a tempo map on the song and you have the skills to map it out before you go and record it, do it, because it will save you, and you know it'll save you a good hour
Yeah.
of trying to work it out in the studio. Like just anything you can do that you think will make that session go fast, do it, because all that means is when you're in the studio, you've got time to try things out rather
Yeah.
than doing the bare essentials and just getting the thing recorded. The more time you have, the more you can go, oh, let's try this amp and see if it works with, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, just
So
as much.
pre-production, I suppose, is what you're saying there, is it? Really?
Yeah,
Do
and you
some
know,
homework, I suppose.
yeah, and like even if you can record some like little scratch guide guitar tracks, that might help the producer if they want to use them to track the drums, and you know.
The other thing I'm thinking about with guitarists, I imagine you must do this quite a lot, is when guitarists have like a melody line or whatever, you know, kind of lead melody line or whatever, and you have to kind of replicate it and maybe multi-layer it. So they've got to know those parts like spot on, haven't they?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, it's just all down to just being as prepared as you can, really. Like,
Mm.
if you're on a tight budget and you've got a limited time in the studio, don't wait until the studio to come up with extra guitar parts. Like, do them now. You know.
Yeah. I got a couple more questions for you, one of which I particularly like, and I got probably one of my own, which I'll load in there as well. And firstly, we've talked about this a little bit, and I'm guessing the answer is no, because I would think you're way too professional for it not to be no. But you've been asked here, does your own music taste kind of, I suppose it does to some extent, inspire your decisions on how you produce music? Does it have an influence on sort of your taste? Does it have an influence on what you try to achieve, I suppose?
I mean, it does in a way because, like, if you take the Oasis thing for me, now the music I do is not really like that, but they have been massively inspiring to me in the way that their arrangements are just so simple, and
Yeah,
like you can strip everything away and the song still works, and just like you know I don't know, they're just really memorable songs. So like that is something I've always taken forward, is like, and I learned it from you know, from listening to them so much, and it's just simple arrangements. Like that's something I always carry into whatever I'm doing, even if it's a heavy band. You can learn a lot from, you know, from that kind of stuff.
So when the bands come in, and I'm guessing that do you have a say in that? Do you say, oh, you know, could you try arranging it this way? Do you do
Yeah,
that much? Yeah.
my
Does that
job
go
is to
down
collab.
okay?
Yeah, my you know, what I do as a producer
Mm,
is
mm,
to collaborate with that band. Like, you know, if it was just, you know, you've the whole thing is that you're working together to make this song as best it can be. So
mm.
if there's something, I'm never forceful about it. Like it's always the band's kind of ultimate decision because it's their record. I'm there to help, but you know, I may hear something. I'm like, you know, this intro is just far too long, and in a world of Spotify, that's just not going to work.
Yeah, yeah,
So and then you've got to look at where the band are trying to place the song, because if it's a song just, and that's, you know, um, if it's for just, if it's not for any kind of, I don't know how to put it, like commercial gain, then if the song's 7 minutes long, fine. But if your end target is like Spotify, you don't want a minute long intro because people have clicked over. So
yeah.
a lot of stuff like that I think about, and the bands usually um, want to hear that feedback, you know, because that's what you bring to it at the end of the day.
However, I imagine sometimes you're trampling on egos.
Sometimes, yeah, but I think I mean I've been pretty lucky that most of the people I work with, they they're totally open to hearing,
That's great.
you know, what I think that the biggest problem that I tend to come across is what people call demoitis, and is when the band have demoed it so, and they've listened to it so much that if I take something away, it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, yeah.
So I always try and encourage the band not to heavily demo the
Okay.
song, because otherwise there's no, you can get so stuck in it and there's no room to try something out because everyone's got this demo in their head. So
Have you got I don't know, a tricky question maybe. Can you think of a song, or yeah, can you think of a song where maybe the band had a specific idea and you said, hey guys, what about trying it this way? And it turned out to be a really successful kind of decision.
there was a song on Kids in Glass House's Smart Casual called Lovely Bones, and it wasn't going to go on the album, and because the chorus was just not working, and then we changed a couple of things, um, and all of a sudden the chorus had room. I think it was just, it was some rhythm going on that just
Mm.
wasn't locking at all, um, and that turned into like everyone's favorite song. So it was that little move.
Nice.
It was so good we did it because it ended up on the record, and that, yeah, you know, stuff like that happens quite a lot. And also, I'm the first person to try something out, and I'm the first person to put my hand up if my idea is rubbish. You know, like
Yeah.
this.
Well,
You've got
that's
to own it.
healthy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a last question for you, right? And I've left this one last. I think it's a great question. A desert island situation, 3 pieces of studio equipment you couldn't live without if you were going to that desert island.
Uh, my NS10 speakers, because I struggle to use any other monitors. That's the I've been using them for so long, and I can only trust them. So my NS10s. That's a tricky question. This
Isn't it?
probably my U47 mic, because I think I could do most things with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then a nice, I don't know, nice J200 style guitar, acoustic guitar.
Nice.
That would keep me happy.
Good combination.
Yeah.
And I was, we haven't really got into acoustic guitar stuff. I kind of prefer playing acoustic guitars these days, weirdly, to electric guitars for some reason. Final question from me then: if you were kind of if you were the young Romesh Dodangoda when you left university, what would the slightly more mature Romesh Dodangoda advise that young Romesh to take into account with his music career?
I think Oh, it's a tough question. That a lot of things, but I think the main thing that I learnt, and this won't apply to everyone, I guess, but I used to kind of look for too much perfection in records I was making, and I was spending a lot of time
Mm.
mixing songs and going over things that no one cares about, you know. Um, and I learned over time that as soon as it feels good, especially with mixing, just leave it there, and because otherwise you can kind of obsess over it for, you know, especially now we're in a digital age where nothing's ever finished because you can just open the project up. So I don't know. I think try not to worry too much about things being perfect, and focus on, do they feel good, you know, because you can lose a lot of time just chasing perfection otherwise.
Okay, I mean, there's a follow-up question there which I could ask you, which I won't ask, I don't think. But there must have been some times over those years where where things you would have done things differently. You know, where maybe not so much a mistake, or maybe I don't know, something you just thought, yeah, that was right at the time, but I wouldn't do the same thing now. I
Oh,
don't know whether
definitely,
that's something you
definitely,
wanted to mention there.
definitely. But I think, I mean, you know, there are sometimes you listen back to stuff and you're like, oh, I wish I'd done that totally different. But
Yeah,
you've got to remember that making records is a snapshot of that in time. You know, it's like you can't change that. That's where the band were at the time. That's where you were at the time. You just have to kind of embrace it. But yeah, you know, it's something that I think everyone falls into. Like, you know, you listen back to old stuff, but I mean, it's cool. You know, it just shows that you're progressing, and you know things have improved, and you know, it's cool to look back. You know.
yeah. It's a thing though, isn't it, with an album? And that album say you're always going to hear the same. You know, it's always going to be the same album coming back at you. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I found there's a hard drive in the studio the other day of an album that I did a long time ago, and I just started remixing it just for myself, and like I was like, oh, this sounds really cool, and it's different. It's different to how I did it,
Yeah.
but then a lot of people love the record for how it sounded. So you know, you can always be, you know, critical about everything, but yeah, you
Yeah,
gotta
things just spin round and round, don't
let
they?
it
If
go.
you allow them
Easy.
to.
Yeah,
Um, is there? I don't know. Again, I'm sorry about asking some tricky questions, but I just really enjoying listening to your responses. I wonder if there's one particular, either an album or a track that you've produced, and that's the one you thought, yeah, that's the one. You know, I'm so proud of that. That was the one.
oh, I don't know. That's too difficult to answer. I can't do it.
I mean, that's why I said a track as
Uh,
opposed to an album, because you know I don't want, you know, you work so many great bands, or is there a particular track that you know it becomes difficult to get right? When you got it right, yeah, you know, that was great.
I don't know. My mind's gone blank, to be honest. I can't think of anything.
You've done too much. Oh, well,
I
listen,
like
Romesh, that's been real joy speaking to you. Thanks very much for your time,
Thank you.
and yeah, and good luck with everything you do. And hopefully you'll hook into some of it on CMF tonight and have a little look. And
Definitely, yeah. And good luck to everyone who's taking part and who's behind the scenes doing anything. Hope it all goes really well.
brilliant. Thanks very much. Thank you,
That's
man.
all right.
Thank you.